Tonight on Brian Ross Investigates. In the movies, art thieves are portrayed like the debonair Thomas Crown. But this man knows different. Tim Carpenter is the FBI agent who runs the Bureau's art theft squad that tracks down art thieves.
This is all about making money. So, no, it's not Thomas Crown affair.
Carpenter's best-known successes have involved the recovery of the ruby red slippers used by Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, and the jersey stolen from New England Patriots quarterback Tom Brady right after the Super Bowl. But what about the theft almost 30 years ago at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston? The empty frames a reminder of what was taken and what remains missing.
Do you think it's still in the country?
Well, perhaps.
Plus, our shout-out to the high school journalism teacher who was threatened with her job after approving a story in the student newspaper about a student who was also working in the pornography industry.
I love my job, I love my students. I will always protect their right to free speech.
From the Law&Crime Network studios in New York City's Herald Square, this is Brian Ross Investigates.
Good evening and welcome. Tonight we take a close look at a crime that has inspired books and movies and caught the imagination of so many: the theft of priceless pieces of art, paintings, sculpture, and, as we are about to see, so much more. The FBI lists more than 7,000 stolen objects it is trying to find, led by a special art theft squad whose lead agent is going public tonight here about the case that is #1 on his priority list. But as we discovered, it's not just Rembrandts and Picassos that get the FBI's attention.
There's no place like home. There's no place like home.
Over the years, those ruby red slippers worn by Dorothy in the beloved movie The Wizard of Oz have become a pop culture treasure.
They're gone! The ruby slippers! What have you done with them?
So when someone broke into the Judy Garland Museum in Minnesota and stole one of the 4 sets of slippers used during the movie production, it was for many fans a very big deal.
Where are Dorothy's ruby red slippers?
Ruby slippers were taken during a smash and grab.
A big enough deal, it turns out, for FBI headquarters to assign the Bureau's elite art theft squad to go find the slippers.
The issue there was what an important piece of Americana that is, right?
Now, under the rainbow.
How can you describe that? What an amazing recovery that was.
Tim Carpenter is the FBI agent at headquarters who runs the Bureau's 20-person art theft squad. They've recovered stolen Rembrandts and other great pieces of art and continue to investigate huge unsolved thefts at major museums. But Carpenter says Dorothy's slippers were also a worthy subject for his group.
We're well known for the cases that we do, and we're recovering Renaissance art or old masters or whatnot, you know, and so a lot of times people see that we're recovering art for the rest of the world. If this was a case where we were able to recover our own cultural property.
Well, 13 years after they were stolen, the ruby slippers Judy Garland wore in The Wizard of Oz have been found.
It's funny what you get headlines for. You also recovered the Tom Brady shirt.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
In the moments after New England Patriots quarterback Tom Brady led his team to the Super Bowl, someone made off with his game jersey. And again, FBI headquarters sent in Tim Carpenter's art theft squad.
It's not historic, and yet it has this huge cultural value for people.
Did you feel that was sort of beneath you in any way?
No, we don't view cases in that regard, right? We look at each case as that cultural value. It's not about intrinsic value or monetary or market value of a piece.
It was the looting of the Iraqi National Museum in Baghdad in 2004, 15 years ago, that led to the creation of the FBI's dedicated art theft squad.
We just simply didn't have enough folks that had the requisite knowledge how to handle, identify, collect, and process cultural property. So that was the lesson that incident taught us, and that's what kind of was the genesis for the creation of our team and our program.
And where does that investigation stand? How much of that art has been recovered?
Not much, not nearly enough. So, and we, you know, it still is up on our top 10 art crimes list.
Since you came aboard here 3 years ago, what's been the most significant case you've cracked?
A couple of years ago, we recovered a Norman Rockwell painting that had been missing for 3 decades. You know, the de Kooning painting from the University of Arizona that was recovered last year those are really significant and remarkable cases.
But to date, no case has had the impact of what the FBI art theft team discovered in this private home in the middle of an Indiana cornfield.
It is a collection worthy of its own museum.
Some 42,000 items.
Miller's collection was no secret. Friends and neighbors had all seen it. Schools even brought kids on field trips to his home.
Inside, a giant collection of antiquities, relics, human remains, essentially stolen, looted, and on display inside.
It was the first time that we had successfully deployed the team.
And how did you get onto it? What was the break in that case?
That came into us as a tip. I'm interviewing this gentleman, and he's describing to me this collection, and he kept using the word huge or, enormous. He was talking about it in those terms, and of course I had to stop him finally and say, well, what do you mean by huge or enormous? Because again, in my experience, maybe it's 300 or 400 pieces. And I'll never forget that he told me, well, I'm not really sure, but I think it's about 200,000 pieces.
The owner, an 85-year-old collector by the name of Don Miller, who died the year after the FBI showed up at his home.
And he was pretty forthcoming with the information. He talked to me, ad nauseum about his collection and was very forthcoming about how he obtained it. And many of the instances and objects that we would discuss, he would talk to us about the illicit nature in which he had obtained it.
He didn't hesitate to say that to an FBI agent?
He did not.
In a huge operation, the FBI took possession of all that was inside Miller's home. To this day, agents still don't have a clear idea of who the rightful owners really are.
In most cases, we don't.
Many of the items appear to have been taken from Native American burial grounds, requiring very sensitive handling, as detailed in a video the FBI has posted on its website.
And we want to make sure that we can properly culturally affiliate that piece to the right tribal group or the right indigenous group and make sure it gets returned where it's supposed to.
The FBI's database of stolen art objects now totals around 7,000.
We have Persian rugs, musical instruments, you name it, Stradivarius violins and whatnot. So if you can think of it in the terms of the cultural property world, we probably have that on our website. We're very busy. We're very busy.
Is there one theft, one issue you really want to solve? Number one on your own personal list?
The Gardner Museum. We would really like to get those paintings recovered.
The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. Thieves broke in, or were let in, 29 years ago on a St. Patrick's Day night. The next morning, 13 pieces of art were gone, paintings cut out of their frames.
Some experts are calling it the biggest art theft in U.S. history.
The art world was distraught. $500 million worth of art that remains missing to this day.
Are you close?
Well, I'm not going to comment on that. That's for the field office to engage on.
Coming up on 30 years since the art was stolen.
Yeah.
Do you think the art still exists?
I like to think so. I hope so.
Do you think it's still in the country?
Well, perhaps.
Only perhaps?
Perhaps.
Teams of law enforcement agents have swarmed the home of a reputed mobster.
FBI agents have traveled to 6 continents, dug up the lawns of elderly mobsters, and pursued hundreds of leads, all to no avail. At one point, the FBI and federal prosecutors essentially claimed they were close to solving the crime.
There's been a significant development in the investigation over the last couple of years, to the point where we can say with a high degree of certainty that we believe we've identified the individuals who were responsible for the original theft. And in fact, we've been able to trace some of the paintings, their whereabouts. That was 6 years ago. Still no paintings, no arrests, despite a $10 million reward offered by the museum.
I would have thought that, the reward has been sizable and significant, of course, and then they doubled the reward. You would like to think, and we've had successes, lots of successes historically with the rewards, but it hasn't really seemed to nudge it loose on this case. So I'm not quite sure what it's going to take. We just need that one good, viable tip from the public.
At this point, are you more interested in recovering the art or finding the people responsible?
Well, of course, we're very interested in the safe recovery and the full recovery of all of that artwork.
Would you let someone walk if they turned in the art?
Well, that's not my decision to make. So, you know, the Boston Field Office has that investigation, and the U.S. Attorney's Office in Boston, that would be a decision they would make.
In the announcement 6 years ago, the then U.S. Attorney in Boston, Carmen Ortiz, did offer the possibility of immunity.
And immunity as a potential for someone who may have knowledge of or has actual knowledge, may have had involvement in the concealment throughout the years of these arts of work, would be available to them. And I'm here to confirm that again.
But no one has since come forward.
Would you call it a cold case at this point?
I don't think it's a cold case because we do get a fair amount of information on that case, right? So we still address a lot of leads on that investigation. But look, we've been very successful on cold cases. Just in the last few years, we've solved a number of cold cases that were 30, 35, and 40 years old. So that's not that uncommon, especially high end. We're talking really valuable, really well-known pieces that will just disappear and kind of go to ground for decades before they resurface. So we hold out hope that we will locate those pieces.
So at this point, you wouldn't say it's been a failed investigation?
Certainly not. No, certainly not. I wouldn't say that.
It continues?
It continues.
And so there's not a period in time you're going to give up and say, I guess it's gone?
No, I don't think we'll do that.
Do you think you'll get it before this 30-year anniversary coming up next St. Patrick's Day?
I can only hope, right? I can only hope. But I'd like to say that if we could solve that case, I might just up and retire. That might be my swan song.
If you have any information you want to share about the stolen art from the Gardner Museum or any other case, you can send tips to the FBI's Tim Carpenter at tips.fbi.gov, or if you want to contact me at lawandcrime.com. And don't forget, the Gardner Museum has offered a reward of $10 million. Coming up next, more on our special report on art theft. It's not as glamorous as movies like the Thomas Crown Affair make it appear. We'll talk to one of the top legal experts who knows how it really works. We continue now with our special report on art theft. We just heard from the FBI, but sometimes, in fact, oftentimes, it takes more than someone with a badge and a gun to get to the bottom of the case.
In the movies, like the Thomas Crown Affair, art thieves are portrayed as cultured and debonair as they make off with priceless treasures. But we got a different take on that criminal industry from this man, Christopher Robinson, a former art dealer who now works as a lawyer, helping clients, including museums and collectors, recover stolen art or find out if they've been sold fakes. We talked with him at the Jill Newhouse Gallery in New York City.
In the movies, we see Thomas Crown, the debonair, cultured art thief. Mm-hmm. Is that what art thieves are?
No, I don't think so. I think it's possible that from time to time there's one or two people who will commission a theft like that for those kinds of purposes. But for the most part, it's a way of making some money. And actually, it's a very bad way of making money because this is not a liquid asset.
We just heard from the head of the FBI art theft squad that they're still looking for the art stolen from the Gardner Museum. After almost 30 years, is it realistic to think that can ever be seen again?
I think so. I mean, there's no way of knowing for sure, but those paintings are so valuable that I really do feel that they will be found again. That one of the main issues, though, is in what condition. I suspect that they've been moved around a fair amount since the theft, and there's always a risk of damage to them over that period of time.
Can art that's well known to have been stolen, can it ever be sold? Is there a market for it?
Not a legitimate market. I mean, there's no way that could be sold at an auction or in a regular private way. I mean, I suspect that those paintings, if they do still exist, have passed hands as some form of collateral, either for arms, for money in some kind, money laundering of some kind, and that would be the normal way that would be used, because I think the understanding is that there's no way those works can exit into the legitimate market.
Is there a way that doesn't involve law enforcement to recover that kind of stolen art?
There are private companies that can work on this. I know that if you are a private individual and you've had a theft, there are companies that can work on this for you. K2 is one I know that does a lot of investigative work in this area. The Art Loss Register also, which has a very important database of lost works of art, can also will also take on an issue like this to try and find the works.
And what about the idea of a reward or a ransom? Is that helpful, or does it encourage future thefts?
No, I think a reward is helpful. The reward is going to be probably aimed at a minor player in all of this, for whom it's going to be a lot of money. And I don't think that those are the people who are going to be looking for that reward are not those that stole the work in the first place.
Here's a question from our executive producer, Rhonda Schwartz.
Chris, my question for you is about the stolen Gardner art. Where do you think it is? Do you think it's in the hands of some wealthy collector who's got it hidden away in his house, in his basement, who's secretly looking at it? Where do you think it is?
I don't think it's like that. I very, very much doubt it's on display anywhere to anybody. These paintings, I think, often end up getting packed up, buried, put in outside storehouses somewhere. It's possible it's in a free port somewhere. The free ports around the world are very little regulated, and it's very difficult sometimes to know what's in there. And those are secure ways of keeping art of this kind.
And how do you feel about it when you see that kind of art, cultural values and treasures stolen?
I think it's horrible. Obviously, anybody with a mind would think that that is a horrible thing to happen. These paintings are on public view for a reason. They're there for the public to enjoy. They're part of our cultural patrimony. And when they're stolen like that, especially if there's a risk that they're going to get damaged, it's a terrible thing.
Do you have clients who get offered this stolen art? And how do you make sure it's legit?
I hope I don't have clients who get offered this kind of art. I've never been told by them if they have. The way that a private client needs to do his due diligence to find out if a work is right or not, you start off with a very simple Google. You can contact some basic databases. The Art Loss Register, based in London, keeps a very good database of art that has been stolen around the world. You can inquire through Interpol as well. There are, and also the IFAR, the International Foundation for Art Research in New York, keeps good tabs on what work has been stolen.
So with the internet, it's even harder than ever to pass stolen art.
I think it's become almost impossible unless it's something relatively generic or minor. You might get a 19th century landscape or maybe an Italian old master painting by nobody in particular, and that's the kind of work that would be difficult to pin down because you may not have an author and you may not have an image that is very memorable.
But art still continues to be stolen.
It does. I mean, it's a great temptation, especially when you see the kinds of prices that art fetches at auction, $400 and something million for the Leonardo. It obviously is a great temptation.
Christopher Robinson, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Up next, our shout out for the high school journalism teacher who put her job on the line to make sure her students could report stories the school administration wanted to keep secret. Our shout out tonight to a brave and determined journalism teacher at a California high school who gave her students and her bosses a real-life lesson in how the First Amendment should work.
The faculty advisor for the school newspaper at Bear Creek High School in Stockton, California is Kathy Duffel.
I love my job. I love my students. I will always protect their right to free speech.
And she had to put her job on the line this year when her students came up with the story that the school administration most certainly did not want published.
We were sitting around pitching story ideas as we normally do, and one of the students pitched this story and said, you know, I've been hearing a lot about a girl named Caitlin on our campus, and she is a sex worker, and there's been some rumors about her, and maybe she would welcome the chance to set the record straight.
18-year-old Caitlin Fink agreed to be interviewed by the student paper's managing editor, Bailey Kirkaby.
When I first began writing this story, it was supposed to be just another profile of a student like we do every issue.
But Caitlin's story included how the senior had been working as a model for a porn agency, selling nude videos of herself and aspiring to become a stripper.
It wasn't even on my radar. For me, it was just another student profile that we were doing.
But then she received this threatening letter from the school superintendent after word quickly spread about what the student paper was up to.
That said that if we were to publish the story and not submit it for prior review to her, then I would be subject to disciplinary action up to and including dismissal.
What did you make of that?
I was shocked. I think I cried a little bit at first. I didn't understand the overreach.
But California is one of the 14 states in the country that limit unreasonable interference by administrators with student newspapers, and she sought help from the Student Press Law Center.
By then, things were getting pretty ugly. There were some intimidating factors at work, and I was feeling pretty uncomfortable at that point.
And what kinds of things were the intimidating factors, did you think?
One of them was to send a police officer who was waiting at my door for me one morning, questioning me about sex trafficking and distributing pornography to minors.
But Kathy Duffel did not back down.
A group of determined high schoolers in Stockton have published a feature article on a fellow student who works in the porn industry.
The story in the school paper, the Bruin Voice, described how Caitlin Fink considered her adult entertainment career as a job just like any other job.
As I'm sure everyone now sees, the content is not obscene in any way, and it's merely just showing the story of a young student at our school who is on her own, living her independent life, and having to navigate the world of the pornography industry. And I feel that that's an important story to tell.
And so far, the school has backed off its threat to fire Kathy Duffel.
I am still employed, yes.
Is that in question, though?
I think it's always a question.
She received support after national news coverage of the showdown, but most important to her is the reaction of her students.
She's been such an inspiration and a role model to everyone at school, not just our class, and I'm glad that she's still here.
And what is there inside of you that gave you this kind of gumption?
I think because this is not my first rodeo with the district, I have had some pretty knockdown, drag-out fights over the years. They've been hurtful, and so I still have something to prove, I think, to this district, that even after 33 years, me putting my job on the line means that I am serious about free speech, and I will always hold them accountable.
So our shout-out tonight to Kathy Duffel. Like many of us in this profession, my own career was launched at a high school newspaper in Highland Park, Illinois, the Shoreline. To this day, I remember and am thankful from all I learned from my journalism teacher, Dr. John Munsky. That's our program for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here next week.